So these are some notes I made on iptables. So the way iptables firewall works is iptables is made up of 3 different tables. There's the filter table. This is the default table. It's used to set policies for traffic allowed into the computer, through the computer, like a router or a switch, and out of the computer. So traffic that's going into the computer, like destined for the computer, or being generated from the computer and leaving it, or going through it, in this case like a router. There's also the NAT table, and that's used to redirect connections for network address translation. So most networks have private networks, and on the outside interface is public network, so there's a translation from public to private IP addressing. That's done with network address translation, or NAT. And then the mangle table, which is used for specialized packet alteration, like changing IP header options and configuring things like QoS, quality of service. Now, iptables also has not only these 3 tables, but it has what's called these chains. It has 5 chains, and the chains are hook points in the packet flow where you can set rules, where you can affect policy. And those chains are the forward chain for flowing through a gateway, coming in one interface and going right back out of the other interface. We'll be using this. Input chain is for traffic that's being delivered to a local process on the computer or firewall router, like traffic that's going into it, like you're trying to SSH into the firewall router, the computer, right? Output is for just after being generated by a local process. So the input chain, if you put a rule on this one, it's going to affect things just before being delivered to a local process on the computer. The output chain, just after being generated by a local process on the computer. And then there's the post-routing chain and the pre-routing chain. The post-routing chain, if you put a rule to this, it's going to affect it just before leaving. It's going to affect the packets just before leaving the network interface. And pre-routing, it'll affect packets just as they're arriving at the network interface. So these are the 5 different chains. And then if we look at these tables and the relationship of the chains to the tables, on the filter table, you've got your network interface. This is traffic coming into the computer. So you have on the filter table, you have the input chain, and this is for traffic destined for the computer. But also in the filter table, you could affect flows that are coming in one network interface and leaving the other network interface, because maybe there's 2 NICs, right? Let's say Ethernet 0 or NPOS 3 and Ethernet 1 or ENP 0S8. So in other words, that's going to be happening at the forward chain. So coming in one interface and then leaving another one, we could affect and put a iptables firewall rule on that forward chain. And then the output is for information generated from the computer or firewall router. So like there's some local process and you're inside of there, and then you're generating content from the device, and then you have the output chain. So once again, this is for going into the computer, leaving the computer, and forward is going through the computer, coming in one interface and going out the other. Now the NAT table has different chains. So for filter table uses these 3 chains, NAT table uses these 3 chains. So once again, network interface, pre-routing, just coming into the interface, and then post-routing, leaving the interface. So it could happen right there. And then also with the NAT table, traffic being generated from the computer, output just after leaving a local process, you could affect a rule there. And then the mangle table is the table that uses all 5 chains, pre-routing, forwarding, post-routing, input, and output. And you can see here I've picked this up. Now I got a lot of this information from a book called, I got it from the Linux iptables Pocket Reference Guide by Gregor N. Purdy, the Linux iptables Pocket Reference Guide by O'Reilly Press. That's where I got this information from. It's a pretty good little handy $5 book, right? Or $3, $10. It's a tiny little pocket reference manual. It's very cool. Okay, and then this is an example of an iptables NAT rule example. So they got this also from the book. So iptables, right? So this is the command iptables rule, and then the table is going to be the NAT table. We're going to append this rule to the pre-routing chain. This is for interface Ethernet 1, so incoming on interface Ethernet 1 using protocol TCP. For destination port 80, we're going to jump to destination NAT or DNAT to the destination 192.168.1.3.80.80. So this firewall rule is basically doing this. It's saying it's going to use the NAT table. It's going to append the pre-routing chain. So traffic coming in the network interface, traffic coming in the network interface hits the pre-routing chain, and then obviously it's going to be going through. So at pre-routing, what are we going to do? On the interface Ethernet 1, let's say, right, protocol, if the coming in this interface, if the protocol is TCP and the destination port is 80, then we're going to basically DNAT it to 192.168.1.3 on port 8080. So this is basically a port forwarding rule. It's traffic coming in destined for port 80 is going to be sent to 192.168.1.3 on port 8080. And then I put a little, and then this, I also got this from the book, a little explanation of these different switches. So this is an example of an iptables firewall rule. So now we're going to implement that right here.